Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Full Potential Show. I'm James Rick, and this is your number one non-boring source for personal development. And today on the line, we have Shel Horowitz. He is a green marketing consultant, author of the Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green book. He wrote that with Jay Conrad Levinson, the guerrilla marketing guru himself, and he is a book shepherd. Today's theme for the show is business can be a lever for social and environmental change. We're going to talk about how business can be more profitable when you go green. And we're going to talk about ways to go green in painless, inexpensive ways. In fact, if you hang on to the end of the interview, you're going to get painless green, 111 tips to help the environment, lower your carbon footprint, cut your budget, and improve your quality of life with no negative impact on your lifestyle. You're going to get that at the end of the interview. Shel is an internet marketer. He's a copywriter. He's an advocate for green, as you can tell. And we're happy to have him here on today's Full Potential Show.
Great to be here with you, James. I'm happy to help people reach their full potential in going green.
Well, it is about helping the world reach its full potential, because really this is what brings us all together. You know, it's improving the environment, and I see you doing that in a big way. And so I think it's great to have you here and share your ideas so that everybody can take their green living to the next level. Now, I know you consult with a lot of companies on how to go green, and you show them how it impacts their bottom line. And so I want to talk about, first of all, what inspired you to get into this? I mean, was there a point when you were just trashing the environment, or have you always been this sort of green advocate?
My entire adult life. I got in very early, really in the early 1970s, I started paying attention to the environment. And at that point, I was in high school, and I graduated high school at 16. So we're going back pretty far. And what I have been doing the last dozen years or so is I've always had this passion for making the world better, and also a passion for marketing and entrepreneurship. And starting about a dozen years ago, I began to find ways where those two strands of my life could actually be braided together into a more cohesive whole. And that's been great. It really started when a local developer here in Hadley, Massachusetts, decided that our local mountain immediately abutting the state park was the perfect place to put 40 McMansions. And I was the one who said, no, I don't think so. And while all the experts were going, oh, this is terrible, there's nothing we can do, I went and started a movement and stopped it. And instead of 40 houses going all the way up the ridge line, they built 2 at the bottom. I was okay with 2 at the bottom. The bottom was appropriate for the site.
Yeah, I mean, this is seriously, get out of your house and make stuff happen, actions that you're taking. And I'm sure it upset a few people, right?
Actually, other than the developer, not really. I've been involved in social change and environmental movements all the way back to the 60s. And this is, I think, the only one I've ever been in that was really a consensus movement. There was almost no opposition to what we were trying to do. There was a great deal of skepticism that we'd be able to do it. And once we overcame that skepticism and showed that we were a real and viable alternative, things happened very fast. When I started that campaign, I figured it would take us 5 years to stop the project. It took 13 months.
Wow. And so here's an inspiration for anybody who sees something in the world that they don't like, and they don't think they can do anything about it. Like you said, the experts just said, oh, no, we can't do anything about it. And you got out of your house and you started this movement. Mm-hmm. What inspired you to take it to the next level? Because I've got to tell you, I'm sick and tired of hearing people talk about what's wrong and then not do anything about it. Because it's like, who cares if you identify the problem? And who cares if you identify the solution? Implementation is where the rubber meets the road. And so I'm always, in respect of those who can take the next step and start creating actions that really make change happen. What do you think is the difference for you going beyond just being inspired to be green in your own life and using a compost and stuff to saying, I want to take this to the next level. I'm getting out there and I'm going to take action. I just don't think we see enough of that right now. What makes the difference, you think, for you versus others?
Well, I think it's the ability to see how to partner with others to make that happen. And I do that in my activism and I do it in my business work. I'm a great believer in leveraging partnerships. I'm a great believer in working with other people to, quote unquote, in George W. Bush's words, and this is the only thing you will ever hear me quote George W. Bush, make the pie higher. But I love that phrase, make the pie higher. You know, it's not about slicing the pie differently. It's about having a bigger pie, having an abundance mentality, having the attitude that, yes, you can actually change the world, and it's a whole lot easier to change the world when you work together with other people. Look at some of the incredible role models we have for this. Look at Nelson Mandela. You know, he was in prison, and yet he became the leader of his country. Lech Walesa in Poland, he was a shipyard worker. These are not people who the powers that be typically designate as world shapers. Gandhi, Gandhi was nobody until, as a young lawyer in South Africa, he got thrown off a train for being the wrong color. And that sparked a lifetime of activism.
So what I hear you saying is it doesn't matter what your station is in life. There have been current world leaders in situations at the bottom of the pile, so to speak, but they had a big vision, a big dream, and a big heart.
And a willingness to work with people to make that happen.
A willingness to collaborate with the right people, or to not collaborate or cooperate with the wrong people, because I think it goes both ways. There's probably been lots of people that could have been world changers that sold out. So what we have here is a situation where we see the change that we want in the world, and we recognize that we have the power, no matter what our station is in this life. The inspirations, the people that have done it are out there, and you always have the power. So never feel powerless. I think that's the first thing that I'm really getting from you, is that you've always felt empowered to do something about situations you didn't feel good about.
I've usually felt empowered. There was one situation where I did feel very shut down, and where I still regret that I didn't try to organize a movement around it, and that was the 2000 coup in the United States. And I felt like there were things I could have done, but I was too shut down.
Talk to me about this. What 2000 coup in the United States?
The selection of a president by a 5-4 vote of the Supreme Court, essentially throwing out the results in Florida from the do-over.
Okay.
And the wreck of the country, of the economy, of the drive toward peace that happened in the 8 years following that, I think if I had known how bad it was going to be, I would have worked harder. I would have really said, this is too important to get stuck in my own shutdown. We've got to do something about this. And I feel bad about not doing that. But nobody else really jumped into it either. There were tens of thousands of activists with good organizing skills and good media background and lots of connections who could have made it happen, and none of us stepped forward.
What I also hear you saying then is that it's important to take responsibility for issues that affect you, but may not necessarily be in your backyard. Somebody's got to take the reins.
Yeah, and it can be challenging because there's always many more priorities than you can possibly accomplish, and you do have to stay focused on where you feel you can do some good. For me, right now, the ability to bring together the business world and the activist world is a place where I feel like I can make a difference personally. I have strong roots in both of those environments. And I also, I've published 8 books, and I'm an international speaker and a syndicated columnist. I have a platform that gives me some space to get this message out there in a way that maybe not everybody does. And I've worked hard to build that.
So, Shel, this is the vision then. You want to take business and activism, you want to bring it together, and you want to make the world greener through business, right?
Yeah, and I see a lot of companies doing that. It's a very exciting time to be in the business world.
Let's talk about why they would be motivated to do that, because I think that's really the key. That's sort of the crux that's going to push it over the edge to the next point. So you have these companies that before they go green, they waste, they're consuming resources, they leave a large carbon footprint, all these things. Now, let's say you're approaching them, or somebody in your support network is approaching them and saying, let's go green. It's going to make you more profitable. How do you convince them? How do you encourage them? And what facts do you have to offer that going green is actually better for business?
Okay, well, for starters, I look at the economic argument, which is a twofold argument. Number one, you're going to save a big pile of money. Just as an example, 2007, I needed a new printer, and I searched for one that printed both sides of the page. Didn't cost me any more than a comparable printer would have been that only printed one side of the page. And saves me roughly 40% of my paper bill. When you can say to a company, let's just say Kinko's, that uses incredible quantities of paper, and you can say to them, hey, would you like to save 40% of your paper bill? They're going to listen, they're going to listen hard. And then the other thing, the other half of it is not just cutting costs, but reaching the green market. And the green market typically is a little more affluent, a lot more well-informed. It has passionate. You can take an ordinary consumer and make him or her into a raving fan of what you're doing. Look at the super premium ice cream industry for a moment, okay? There are basically two companies that have any traction in that market out of the hundreds and hundreds of companies in that space. You can probably name them both. James, what do you think the two companies are?
I'm a big ice cream fan. You're putting me on the spot here. I'd say the first one is Haagen-Dazs, and the second one, they're probably not the biggest. Dryers. Those are the first two that pop out in my mind.
Haagen-Dazs is one of them. And the other is a little upstart hippie company from rural Vermont. Maybe you heard of them, Ben & Jerry's.
Okay, all right, yeah, you got me. You stumped me, Shel.
We're talking the super premium stuff. We're talking about the stuff that's basically like eating butter. Those two companies together typically have about 85% of the market. And, it's like 40% for Ben & Jerry's and 45% for Haagen-Dazs. Well, Haagen-Dazs is a big corporate muscle, long-established player, founded in the 20s, lots of marketing muscle. And then these two long-haired guys with wire-rimmed glasses come out of a garage in Burlington and build a company that really can play in that space with Haagen-Dazs. And yes, they are now owned by a food giant themselves, but they're independent for the first couple of decades, and they still have local control. That was one of the things that they negotiated in the buyout, is they have their own private board of directors that answers to Ben & Jerry's and not to Unilever. And they still have a very, very strong presence in socially conscious ice cream. And I'm going to put out my hypothesis that the reason they are successful, it's not just that their ice cream tastes good. I mean, I live in just outside Northampton, home of Harold's Ice Cream, which tastes better than either Ben & Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs, in my opinion. Plenty of other super premium brands out there in a little local niche making great ice cream. So that was not why they succeeded. I'm going to say that I think they succeeded because they were out there at the solar festivals. They were out there at the organic gardening conferences. They were out there making the world better. They buy fair trade ingredients. They buy ingredients from a brownie making company that employs unemployable people, urban, ex-prison offenders or ex-mentally ill people who are making the brownies for Ben & Jerry's because they want to do good with every dollar that they're spending. And I think that's why they have this huge loyal fan base. And that's why they have 40% of a market share that has hundreds of people in it and only two with any traction.
All right, so I hear two big arguments from you for going green, and that is you can cut costs significantly, reduce your cost base because you're saving on supplies. And then you get to go after a green market that can now move them from just interested in your product to being fans, raving fans, like in the example of this ice cream. Ben & Jerry's.
A fan of like General Motors. They might be a fan of an individual General Motors product, but it's hard to find people who were like, or Exxon. They don't have a fan base.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Ben & Jerry's has a fan base. Timberline Shoes has a fan base. A lot of the very green companies have fans, as well as customers.
All right, so I mean, these are two very big, convincing points then for a company that wants to build that brand image, that wants to build fans, and then also wants to save money. Now, obviously, this has a real-world positive impact because if you're reducing your expenditures, you're reducing your consumption, and you are doing things that are green, you're helping the world. So this is where special interests or private interests meet the greater interest, the global interest.
Exactly. And that's the key, James.
That's the key.
That when you combine personal self-interest and global self-interest, you have a very, very strong formula.
So let's talk about why companies aren't making the move then. I mean, because this is a great formula, and this is something that has to happen. It has to happen if we're going to preserve and sustain our planet and all the life on it. Yep. Why aren't companies making the jump, and what's holding them back?
I think a lot of it is misinformation that going green is too expensive, it's too hard. This is why I wrote the ebook Painless Green, because I can walk into any room anywhere, even in my own house probably, and find 5 or 10 things that could be done greener without costing a lot, or in many cases without costing anything, and without being terribly inconvenient. But a lot of people have looked, instead of looking at the low-hanging fruit first, they've looked at the expensive and difficult parts of going green. And yes, there are certainly ways to go green that cost you a bloody fortune and are hard to implement, but there are also plenty of ways that are really easy. And there's some very innovative thinking going on. Just yesterday, I discovered that Method, the natural cleaning products company, has figured out a way. I don't know if you're familiar with the garbage island that's floating in the Pacific. It's mostly plastic bottles. They've actually figured out a way to go out there and harvest raw material to make new bottles out of that pile of junk.
Wow. And they have this huge landmass, like the size of Texas, of free materials now.
Yeah. So they're going to be, over the next, I don't know how many years it's going to take them to deplete that enormous piece of junk the size of Texas. But they're finding a way to reuse it. And always, if you look at what's called cradle-to-cradle thinking, where the waste stream of one process becomes an input to create another one. So maybe you're making beer and you have the waste grain that's been fermented, and you can grow mushrooms on that. And then you can take the mushroom waste and make it into fish food, and on it goes. And so you're not putting stuff in landfills, you're recycling in a deep and meaningful way. You're using those raw materials to create something else. So that kind of systemic thinking, and I have a debt in my thinking on this to a man named Amory Lovins from the Rocky Mountain Institute, who is, I think, one of the most brilliant thinkers of our time. And he has shown how we can basically eliminate oil completely in about 30 years and do it without going nuclear. And you do it by taking, for example, an industrial process where fluids are funneling through a narrow pipe with a lot of curves. You yank that pipe out, you put in a big fat straight one with no bends and a lot less friction in the inside because it's got a wider diameter. And the stuff just gushes through and saves you 70 or 80% of the energy to push it through. You can look at how to make our buildings much, much more sustainable, how to use 10 or 15% of the energy that is typically used now. And you can do all this in ways that make money for business, that save money for the user.
What I'm hearing you say, Shel, is that there's little incremental steps that we could be making. Instead of these big, expensive retooling projects, we should start with the little ones, and these little percentage gains, 1 or 2% here, 5 or 10% here, or even in some cases, design modifications that can lead to a 70 or 80% gain. That's where we should start first. The cheapest, most easy to implement green advances, and then move on down the line to the more expensive ones.
Savings from those projects to do the bigger, more complicated ones.
Got it. So these little gains that you make today can then be conserved and used to make the bigger, even bigger investments for the bigger gains tomorrow.
And we can do this at the huge corporate level. We can also do it at the individual level. I talked about my printer saving me 40% of my printing bill. I haven't yet talked about that I live in what might be the oldest solar home in the country, built in 1743, which, just how old is that? Well, Thomas Jefferson was born that year. And we put solar on our house in cloudy New England, in a house built in 1743. And, we had over the last, we're taping this in September, my electric bills for June, July, and August were $11, $12, and $17.
Now, I mean, obviously, people know about solar, but how are you doing it, Shel? Did it cost a small arm and a leg to pay for this?
Well, we put the hot water system was about $7,000, and the photovoltaic was about $10,000, but half of that cost was subsidized by various programs. So our cost was $5,000 for the photovoltaic, and then $3,500 for the solar thermal. And in terms of how much, particularly the solar thermal, the savings has been very measurable.
I was going to say, what's the long-term payoff point on this? Like, if you'd have been continuing to pay on your power bill, at what point does the investment pay off what you would have paid on the power bill?
Well, the hot water brought down the electric bill because we had electric hot water before that. We dropped about $100 a month off our electric bill immediately. Okay. Now, we did have some cost. We had a new roof done a few years later, and there were some costs in taking down the collectors and putting them back up afterwards. But these days, most people who are putting up solar know about that, and they design them so you can hinge them out of the way and work on your roof.
Okay.
Not have to spend the $4,000 we had to drop to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of adds to the bill a little bit.
Yeah. But I think that the hot water system has probably paid for itself by now. We put that in 2001.
And when does the other investment pay for itself then?
Well, in the summer, it's doing really, really well. And in the winter, not so much. I think it was installed maybe a little lower on the roof than was ideal because the solar hot water system was already on the good spot on the roof. So my guess, we put that in 2004. It'll probably paid for itself, I don't know, 2015, somewhere around.
All right, so I mean, the point is that eventually you get to a point where it has paid itself off. It's the best long-term investment you can make, this going green. I'm really happy, Shel, that the giveaway today is 111 tips to help the environment, lower your carbon footprint, cut your budget, all the things that we're talking about. These are little incremental changes that I think apply to both individuals as well as businesses, right, Shel?
Right.
Okay, so I'm really excited to give this away here on the show. How do they get that report?
Okay.
Get this book.
If you go to painlessgreenbook.com/Earth Day, one word.
Okay.
And then you'll be asked for a code, and you put in the code Earth Day. You get this $9.95 ebook for free. And I should mention too that my most recent print book, Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, comes with a nice $2,000 package of bonuses as well. That one you do have to pay for, but it's not expensive. And if you are in business and want to really stimulate your thinking about not only how to go green, but how to build alliances with other people, open up new markets, do a lot of really interesting things very cheaply and really benefit from it, you can go to greenandprofitable.com, and there are links there to buy the book either from me or from your favorite bookseller. And then you go back. Once you have the book, you go to guerrillamarketinggoesgreen.com and register for the bonuses, and then you'll have the book so you'll know how to spell gorilla.
They can go and they get the book, Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, at greenandprofitable.com, and then after they get the book, they'll know how to spell guerrilla marketing, and they can go to guerrillamarketinggoesgreen.com, and then that's where they can register for the $2,000 worth of free bonuses, right?
Right.
Okay. So that's where you go. Shel, I want to thank you for being on the Full Potential Show today and sharing with us some of the ways that we can make the world a greener place and really improve the environment, because I really think it is our responsibility right here, right now, to pave the way, no pun intended, pave the way with green over the next 50 or 100 years. We have to take responsibility for that future and the upcoming generation. So I really want to thank you for your contributions to make that happen. And for everybody watching and listening right now, recognize your power to really be active in making change happen and not just talk about it. There's enough talk already. It's time to take action, and you can start with small incremental changes in your own personal lives. And if you're the leader of a company, you can make some big sweeping changes across the company to make it greener. And there's some real solid reasons, incentives that will add to your bottom line for doing so. Shel has made it clear for us. Green is the way to go. Shel, again, thank you so much for being on the Full Potential Show today.
It's been a pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, and everybody who's watching and listening right now, be sure and subscribe or like the Full Potential Show so you can get more great insights from people like Shel and more freebies that you'll only find right here on the Full Potential Show. Well, that concludes this week's episode of the Full Potential Show, your number one non-boring source for personal development. I'm James Rick, and if you want to get more positive programming for your brain absolutely free on a weekly basis, just visit fullpotential.com.
If you like the Full Potential Show, you're going to love the Full Potential Club. What would you like most as a Full Potential Club member? Be 2 to 3 times more productive? Do what you're passionate about? Have more energy? Reduce your work hours? Travel the world? Enjoy an amazing lifestyle on a frugal budget? What if you could do them all? James Rick has been there and done it in ways that few people have. For anyone serious about taking their life or business to the next level, you know you've got to do more than just watch. You've got to do. Join James Rick and other like-minded people for an incredible $10 a month at fullpotential.com/club. Be educated. Be empowered. Be the best version of you. fullpotential.com/club. Try it free for 30 days.